What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the BizDad Podcast. Today, I am stoked to talk to, it's very rare that I say I'm excited to talk to a lawyer, but today I'm really excited to talk to a lawyer, Brian Beckcom. I'm really looking forward to getting to know you a bit more, having a good conversation. Just even the pre-call was exciting. I'm looking forward to learn a little bit more about you. So if you can, Brian, introduce yourself to the audience, tell us about your family, and tell us about your business.
Yeah, it's funny you'd say that, Adam. I'm excited about the show, too, and I tell people, as a matter of fact, I told somebody this last night. I said, I hope you never have to hire me.
Yes.
But if you ever have a problem, you should be I should be the first one you call. I'm really good at what I do. And, like I said, I'm a lawyer, although I think I would self-identify first as a dad and a husband. I got 3 kids. Couldn't be prouder of them. 2 of them are in college, both boys. Both of them are in the Corps of Cadets at Texas A&M. Which means unlike most kids nowadays, they volunteered to go through one of the hardest things you can go through as an 18 and 19-year-old, harder than the service academies, harder than the Citadel, harder than VMI. And they did it shaving your head, having to wear a uniform, say yes sir or no sir to people that are 2 years older than them. I'm so proud of them. My younger one just finished what we call his fish year, which is the toughest year by far. My older one, Gus, just put on what we call senior boots, which are the most iconic piece of footwear, I think, in the whole country, at least from a military standpoint. And then my daughter is a 2-sport athlete in Houston. In fact, she's got her second-round softball playoff game tonight at 6:30. Nice. So looking forward to that. I've been married for 25 years. I was smart about it, Adam. Got married in 2000. So anytime somebody asks me how quickly or how long you've been married, I can do it super quick in my head.
Very wise.
Yeah, so 25 years, same woman, Kara. She's a retired lawyer. She's been a stay-at-home mom since we had our second kid. And then I run a law firm and a podcast. My law firm is VB Attorneys. That's V as in Victor, B as in Brian. My partner's name is Vuk, V-U-K, Vujasenovich. And so we thought VB Attorneys would that would be nice for our clients, a little easier to spell. So yeah, we've been in business for 20 years now. This is our 20th anniversary, and it's been a tremendous ride. Been able to help thousands of people. It's very, very fulfilling what I do. A lot of lawyers, quite frankly, I wouldn't have lasted 2 years doing what a lot of lawyers do. For example, and in fact, I didn't last 2 years. When I first started out, I was at a huge law firm with hundreds of lawyers representing Fortune 50 companies and billion-dollar insurance companies. And while I learned a lot, I hated it because guess what? Insurance companies don't exist. They're just pieces of paper. Mm-hmm. They don't have human feelings and emotions. And if you do a good job or a bad job, it doesn't matter. And so I didn't get the same sort of fulfillment that I've gotten representing kids, families, wives, husbands, firefighters, military people, teachers, doctors, lawyers, police officers, etc. It's given me a lot more fulfillment. And then I've also had the great good fortune to have my own podcast for 5 years now called Lessons from Leaders. And I've had a bunch of New York Times bestselling authors, military heroes, a lot of people in pretty prominent positions, couple national level politicians, couple state level politicians, judges, just kind of really good positive leaders. And so I think I'm getting close to my 100th show. In fact, I just released one last week with a member of SEAL Team 6, which is nice, which is really awesome. So that's kind of that's not the short or long version of my biography. That's kind of the middle version.
Welcome to the BizDad Podcast, where we dive into the melding of fathership and entrepreneurship with your host, the original BizDad himself, Adam Labar. Adam is a Christian, a former Air Force officer, a dad to 3 amazing kids, a coach, a real estate investor, and a business owner. On this podcast, he'll explore the unique journeys of amazing dads who are striving for greatness in both business and family. So whether you're a dad who is an aspiring entrepreneur, a seasoned business owner, or simply a man striving to be a better dad, get ready as the BizDad brings you conversations to inspire, challenge, and equip you to be a better dad and entrepreneur. And now, here's Adam.
Before I go down some of those routes, though, I want to learn a little bit more about your history. I think you said before we started the podcast that your sons are now fourth generation at A&M. Is that right?
That's right.
All right. So tell me a little bit. Let's rewind and kind of go down that path. What was it like for you growing up? I know that you like me, were a military brat. So what was it like for you growing up with your father kind of in the military, running around the country or the world? And, what was the dynamic between your mom and your dad? And how was that like for you growing up?
My dad was in Vietnam when I was born. He flew the last set of combat missions, Linebacker 2. He was a B-52 navigator and bombardier. He received the Distinguished Flying Cross. And he was at the very end of the war when the North Vietnamese actually had SAM missiles that could get up to the B-52s. So it was pretty dangerous stuff. But he was there when I was born. In fact, my mom, we lived in upstate New York, Plattsburgh Air Force Base, which is, I don't think Plattsburgh is Plattsburgh still there? Do you know?
I know it closed, but I lived up there myself. So it's funny.
It's literally on the Canadian border. I was super duper young. I don't remember much about it, but my mom, when I was 6 months old, put me on a military transport plane, and she flew with a 6-month-old from upstate New York all the way to the Guam Islands, which is where my dad was stationed, because they would fly from Guam over Vietnam. And so I didn't see my dad until I was 6 months old. And he said, my dad's kind of a funny guy. And he said, man, when I first got those pictures of you had pimples all over your face, I was so embarrassed. I didn't want to introduce you to my buddies. But we moved around quite a bit. I was born in Barksdale Air Force Base, Bossier City, Louisiana. My dad retired out of Carswell Air Force Base. Like I said, we lived in Plattsburgh. My dad taught ROTC at the University of Kansas. Tragically, when I was 5, and I have a younger brother who's 2 years younger. When my brother was 3, my mom got advanced stage breast cancer. And she ended up dying when I was 10 and my brother was 8. So my dad raised my brother and I as a single father, while at the same time working full time in the Air Force. He transitioned into intelligence. They asked him to fly the SR-71 Blackbird, and he said, and they also asked him to take command of a base, which would have promoted him to full bird colonel. And he said no to both of those because it would have forced us to move high schools. And my dad thought it was more important, and my brother and I have a little continuity. So he retired after 20 years, and then he became a high school teacher. He taught junior ROTC for 20 years in Fort Worth, Texas. He's my hero. A lot of kids say that about their parents, but he was my mother. He was my father at the same time. Same with my brother. He's influenced thousands of kids, sent hundreds of kids to Texas A&M and into the Corps of Cadets. All I cared about, Adam, when I was in high school was basketball. That's all I cared about. So I ended up playing basketball at Texas A&M, didn't join the Corps my first year, and then got burnt out and decided I needed to do something different. So I joined the Corps of Cadets my second year at Texas A&M, but as a freshman. So I would go through the same challenges that all the other freshmen went through. My dad had gone through the Corps. My brother had gone through the Corps. My granddad, class of 1938, had gone through the Corps. And now my 2 boys are going through it too. So we're a Texas Aggie Corps of Cadets family through and through.
Man, that's a lot of history you have there. So
yeah,
forgive me. Usually before I start recording, I ask if there's anything that's off limits. So if any of this goes down a path you don't want to, please just let me know. I'll cease and we'll edit it out. But
open book.
10 years old, losing your mom.
Yeah,
that had to be. Like my son is 10 years old now, my oldest, and I can't imagine the life change that would be for him. What was you're looking back on it? I'm sure you have a different view than it was when you were going through it. So kind of talk me through what that was like mentally for you then, and how you kind of worked through it with your siblings and your dad.
Yeah. So that's a really good question. I can tell you when my mom was the victim of some very, very bad medical malpractice. She was an Air Force nurse. She had done, this is in the late 70s, early 80s. She was doing self-breast exams and felt some lumps in her breast and went to the military doctor 4 times over 2 years. And he kept just saying, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. Nowadays, they would immediately do a mammogram. Mm-hmm. Back then, he just blew her off 4 different times. After 2 years, finally, they figured out what it was, and it advanced everywhere. They said, you got 6 months to live. Double mastectomy, broken hips, no hair. She ended up lasting 5 years. So I did get to know her just a little bit, but not really that well. And I still have good memories, but they're, when you're between 5 and 10 years old, there's only so much you can remember. What I do remember is after I lost my mom, one of the first things my dad did with my brother and I is he put those little refrigerator magnets. Mm-hmm. He put a gigantic number 3 on the refrigerator, and he got my brother and I together, and he said, that signifies that the 3 of us will always be a unit. Like if I start dating, which he ultimately did, he's now been married for 30 years to a former undercover police officer who's awesome. But it gave my brother and I a great sense of comfort that we would always be a unit. What I used to worry about, though, Adam, and I do have conscious memories of this, is what happens if my dad doesn't come home? I mean, he's in the military. Something could happen. If my dad doesn't come home, I'm going to be an orphan. So I did have some of these kind of subconscious fears, but my dad did such a good job of raising me that, it didn't really affect my ability to succeed. And in fact, I think in many ways, if you look back at history, not to compare myself to historical figures, but if you look back at history, a lot of the people we know about had some sort of childhood trauma. Mm-hmm. Either they lost a parent or they had a terrible relationship with a parent or something else traumatic happened. And people like that end up a lot of times being very successful because they use that as the drive. And so I remember thinking in high school, I'm going to prove to people that somebody raised by a single father can be just as successful as somebody that's raised by 2 parents or a single mother. So I've always had this drive, even today, a little bit, to kind of push myself and prove myself against that standard. So I would say, as strange as it sounds, it probably resulted in being part of a lot of my success. The other thing that's really interesting about this, Adam, is I didn't know it at the time, but my dad sued the United States government. He hired a lawyer in upstate New York, sued him for malpractice. It's impossible to win against the United States government. He won. And he won this case, and it wasn't a whole lot of money, but it was enough to allow me to go to college and law school, and my brother go to college without racking up a bunch of debt. And the interesting, your listeners can look this up, Beckcom versus the United States. It's on Google. The whole case is reported. I had no idea that this case was online until I was a first-year lawyer. My wife called me up, and she was crying, and she said, "Have you ever read your mother's case?" I said, "What?" She said, "Yeah, have you ever read? I just read it." I said, "No, I've never read it." And so I immediately got online, and I read this case, and when my dad filed the case, my mom was still alive. She died during the case. So she was able to be deposed. And there's a bunch of stuff in there about her talking about how much she loved her boys, how much she wanted to see them graduate from high school, from college, get married, stuff like that, which sounds kind of sad, but it was actually like I got a chance to hear from her again 20 years later. So it was actually a great gift to be able to see this. So, but the point of that is, I think subconsciously, that this is one of the reasons I do what I do. And I always felt this great sense of appreciation for this lawyer that represented this. My dad was an Air Force major and then a lieutenant colonel, Air Force major, and his 2 boys. In fact, I called him about 8 years ago. I looked him up. He was retired. He's in his 80s. I said, you're not gonna remember me, but my name is Brian Beckcom. He immediately cut me off. He said, "I'll never forget that case as long as I live." I said, "Well, I just want to let you know that I'm a lawyer now too, and I'm doing what you did for my family for other families. And I just wanted to let you know that." So, sometimes tragedy leads to really, really beautiful things ultimately. And I think that's the case, at least for me.
That seems to be, honestly, there's a trend of that in a lot of the men I talk to about some sort of tragedy in their life has led to them being where they are, or they're, maybe they were brought up very poor and they told themselves they're never going to be that and they're going to, turn it into something else. But that kind of leads sometimes into an inability to kind of separate themselves from that as they continue to go. How did you kind of you said to this day, you're still on that track sometimes where it drives you to do all these things. Has that drive ever toned itself down? Have you been able to kind of separate yourself from the pain and tragedy? It sounds like probably, but just kind of walk me through what that looks like for you as somebody who's able to maybe set it aside or maybe not as you continue into adulthood.
Yeah. So it was a big part of what I call the fire in my belly in high school, in college, in law school, when I started my own business. Over time, that fire dampens a little bit, but it definitely drove me. I mean, it definitely drove me to prove myself. And one of the things that I've worried about, and some of your listeners may relate to this, I didn't grow up with a lot of money. I wasn't poor, but we didn't, Air Force officers at the time didn't make tons of money. And I make good money as a lawyer, way more than I thought I would ever make, quite frankly, probably more than I deserve it sometimes. And so my kids grew up differently than I did. Both parents are there, wealthy neighborhood in Houston, lots of, I was around Air Force officers' children and enlisted men's children. I mean, I remember I used to go to church on Sunday. My dad would bring us to church. And back then there was 3 services, Protestant, Catholic, and I think there was a Jewish service of some sort. But when you go to the Protestant service, I mean, anybody who knows anything about the Christian religion knows Protestant basically doesn't mean anything. I mean, there's Episcopalian, there's Southern Baptist, there's 500 different Protestant sects. Well, I got to listen to these black gospel choirs when I went to church, and these Episcopalian, so it was all mixed up, and it was a super great experience. My kids haven't really gotten to have that experience, and so I've always worried a little bit about what's gonna be their fire, what's gonna drive them. I mean, like I said, both parents, nice neighborhood, nice cars, good-looking girlfriends and boyfriends, lots of wealthy people around them. My dad used to tell me, and it's not until the last 5 or 10 years that I think this has really struck home to me. He used to say there's two kinds of people that I really admire: people that come from nothing and make something of themselves, and people that come from everything and make something of themselves. And I can tell you that second part is a bigger deal than maybe I realized. One trap that I've gotten into personally that I got to avoid at 52 years old is I can afford what I want to. I can basically do what I want to do, and that's dangerous. Like, if you don't have anything to do, if you don't have any reason to do things, you can really succumb to being lazy and going down the wrong path and stuff like that. So for example, I do jujitsu almost every day. At 52 years old, that can be a little physically demanding. I don't have to do that. Most of my friends don't do stuff like that. It's hard, but I got to find something to push myself with. And so I've always worried about that with my kids. And the fact that both of my boys opted to join the Corps and voluntarily put themselves through probably the hardest freshman year experience in the entire United States. Boy, I can't tell you how proud I am of them for doing that. Because guess what? They didn't have to do it either. They could have joined fraternities, drank beer 4 days a week, hung out with good-looking girls, and made a 2.2. They could have chosen that route. And a lot of wealthy kids do choose that route. They chose the hard route. And I don't think, at least in my mind, everything meaningful in my life has been something that's been hard. Yeah. The easy stuff is not meaningful. The hard stuff is very meaningful. So I'm glad that they chose that route.
Yeah, you started off in a way kind of talking about what was going to be my next question was, how do you make sure that your kids have that same fire? And then with a small amount of concern, but then followed it up with, but now they chose to do something difficult. What do you think, as you were raising, especially your son, since that's who's in A&M right now, as you were raising your sons, what do you think, what would you attribute their desire to go do something like A&M and do something difficult when they were already kind of, born with that silver spoon, to go with the analogy? What would you attribute things that you and your wife did, or maybe that they did that led them down that path?
So the number one thing I would say is they're both tough boys. Like, yeah, they were raised in a wealthy neighborhood. Yeah, they've had, my first car was $1,000 car.
Yeah.
Both of them drive nice pickup trucks, expensive, not super expensive, but wear nice clothes. You know, I remember on Fridays when I was in high school, if my dad gave me $10 to go to Dairy Queen, it was a big deal, right? But I think it's a part of their character, and they're both really, really tough boys. Secondarily, I think, and this wasn't really conscious on my part, the fact that they saw their dad going and doing jiu-jitsu with 25-year-old Brazilian black belts, the fact that they saw their dad working out, the fact that they see their dad taking on billion-dollar corporations and beating them. Like, there's one thing for me to tell them, this is what you need to do. You need to put yourself, but if you're not doing it yourself, like, you know, kids don't care what you say. They care what you do.
Yeah.
And so I think it was a combination of both of them have great character. They're very gritty. They're very determined. They're tough as nails. But I think they also saw their mother and father were not just talking the talk. They were walking the walk too.
Yeah, and I try to explain that I talk about it. I'm not the only one that says it, of course, but most things are caught, not taught, right? Like they catch on to it when you're going through life, and they see what you're doing, and it's much more about how you act than it is about what comes out of your mouth. Because, you know, just like communication is like, what is it, like 60 or 70% is visual, what I'm seeing the person, as opposed to what they're actually saying. So, you know, it makes a huge difference. So you had a dad who was in the military, flying planes and running around. Obviously, watching what happened with the lawsuit was kind of the thing that kind of drove you towards the lawyer side of it. When did you decide for sure I want to go be a lawyer? Like, was it? Did you know, like, at that young age, you were like, boy, this lawsuit really helped us as a family, or what was it that kind of drove you to that?
Not at all. In fact, like I said, when I went to college, I didn't have a major. I had no idea what I wanted to study. I think in high school for like a year, I wanted to be a pilot. My dad would go flying privately after he retired. I would go up with him sometimes. It was fun. But I was focused on basketball. Like, that's what I wanted. I wanted to play in the NBA when I was in high school. Like, that was my goal. And, you know, that didn't happen. But this was in the early 90s. I'm at A&M. We used to have this major called General Studies, which just means you don't have a major. And you can do that for 2 years. Well, guess what? Early 90s, what comes around? The personal computer revolution, the internet. I started messing around with computers. I was like, took a few computer classes. I said, this is a lot of fun. I like this. And so I ended up majoring in computer science. And then I took another degree in philosophy. No idea what I wanted to do. No lawyers in my family on either side. 10 generations. I'm the only one. And so I had no like mentors or anything like that. What ended up there's two things that ended up helping me decide to go to law school. One of them was, I tell this story, it's kind of jokingly, I spent 4 years in a computer lab in college with a bunch of dorks, and I didn't want to do that my whole life. So I went to law school, and what do I do now? 25 years later, I sit behind a computer screen with a bunch of dorks.
Yep, that you do.
That's number one. But number two was, and again, this thing with my mother, this lawsuit was not conscious at all. I never even really thought about it. But when I was in the Corps, I advanced to a very high leadership position by the time I was a senior. I was in charge of the entire Air Force, 500 Air Force cadets. I was what they call the wing commander. And a lot of the cadets were being mistreated by the administrators at A&M, and I didn't like it, and I was able to help them, and it made me feel good. Like, it made me feel really good to be able to help people. And I like to read, write, and talk. And so I was like, you know what? I don't know what I want to do yet. I'll go to law school. So I went to law school at the University of Texas, did really well in law school. Everybody that does well at the University of Texas in these big law schools does the same thing. They go to huge law firms and they represent Fortune 500 companies. So that's what I thought I was supposed to do. And that's what I did. I had this case. Right when I got there, I was representing a big roofing company. Young black guy, Eric Lagrone was his name, fell off a roof, got hurt. I was defending the company. He beat me. He won, got a verdict. And I remember when I was giving him the check, I was thinking, God dang, I'm so glad this guy's getting the check. And immediately I was like, wait a second, I'm on the wrong side of this.
Yeah.
And so shortly afterwards, I left and started my own firm.
So I was a federal agent for a while with the Air Force, and we had a reservist who was a reserve federal agent, and he talked about, or he was a lawyer on his full-time gig up in Michigan, but he was a defense lawyer, and I was like, boy, that just feels wrong as the guy who's making the arrest to have you as my partner, the guy who defends these folks, Yeah. And one of the things he talked about was like his role as a defense attorney was not necessarily like he could be pretty certain this person is guilty and they could be, but to make sure that the system is treating him properly, that there's actual due process, that things are going well, that the system is not abusing anybody that's going through the process. And as I hear you tell that story, it reminded me of him. And I'm thinking to myself, boy, on both sides, you had the heart to know that this person actually deserved this check. And you talked about earlier that the insurance companies have there's no emotion in a company, like it's a piece of paper, especially insurance companies, the only emotion they have is anger when they lose, and it's like, they don't when they have to write a check. So like, did you find yourself caught in any sort of, as the case was going on, in any sort of like, emotional like battle in yourself about like, hey, I'm defending this, or like I'm defending this company, but I really don't believe in what's going on? Or was it not until the very end when you kind of realized?
It wasn't until the very end. When I was in it, I wanted to win it, period.
Yeah.
I had a client that hired me and my job was to win this case. And that's what I wanted to do. But then afterwards, when I didn't win it, the fact that I was happy about not winning it, that's what kind of set off the alarms in my head. Like, Fortune 500 companies and insurance companies they have armies of lawyers, thousands of lawyers, all these Harvard, Yale eggheads, all these nerds that went, they have plenty of advocates, and a lot of working men and women, a lot of first responders, blue collar people. They don't have the same level of lawyer, because they can't afford to pay as much unless we have a contingency fee. So to me, like, I think it's super duper important. In fact, I was talking to my wife about this last night. All these MS-13 folks that are getting put into, like, I don't know if you know about this prison in El Salvador. It is bad. You know what? If you're here illegally and you're committing murder and violent crimes, I'm glad they're there. I'm so glad. They should be there. But we have to be very, very careful. We don't want one innocent person being subject to that. And so the American justice system has been set up for 250 years we would rather have a guilty person go free than an innocent person be convicted. And sometimes, Adam, I worry that we can't keep both of those thoughts in mind. Like, if you're here illegally and you are violent, you need to get it. We need to get you out of here as fast as we can.
Yeah.
But we have to have enough judgment to make sure that we're not sending people that are innocent out of the country into these very, very bad places. We got to be able to keep both thoughts in mind at the same time. You know what I mean? Like, it's not one or the other. We can do both.
Yeah. And I think when we started to tie it down to the partisan politics and associating everything to partisan politics, as opposed to like actually thinking about what the founders' desire was and what the purpose of our law system is, our legal system is, then we've kind of lost, we started to lose our way on that. And it was like, I had a conversation with a bunch of folks on Facebook because I was asking, I said, why is one side tying so hard to the fact that we need to get this quote unquote Maryland man back? If we looked at that particular case, right, of that one MS-13 guy. And it was like, I get the fact that of all the places this guy was supposed to go, and this isn't the path that I necessarily thought we were going to go, but again, this conversation is where it goes. Of this one guy, due process in a way was not given because he was sent to the only country he was told like that the legal system said we can't deport him to, right, is El Salvador. And we sent him to El Salvador. Should we have sent him somewhere? Absolutely. Should we have sent him to El Salvador? Apparently not. Judge said probably not a good idea, right? So let's make sure that the legal system is doing right. Even if worst case scenario, if we make a deal and he comes back and then within 24 hours, he's in a different country now. We have to be able to think on both sides of those without it becoming a right versus left tug of war. Like the mission still needs to be the mission. The focus still needs to be the focus. And we need to make sure that we keep our country in the best shape that we can. It's an interesting It's
and the law is one of the things that I've been most proud of as a lawyer is a lot of our institutions have really struggled over the last 10, 15 years, like, and rightfully so in some cases. Like, we've lost some trust in some of our institutions, and the institutions have caused us to lose our trust in some of those cases. The legal system, at least so far, has held up really good. Like, the American legal system, for all of its flaws, and it's got plenty of flaws, is the best in the world. And it continues to impress me how judges, right or left or center, lawyers, right or left or center, are able to put that aside and say, let's focus on the facts, let's focus on the law, and let's focus on what's right and wrong. And so there's a lot of times where I'm not proud of what some of my lawyer colleagues do and some of my judge colleagues do. But over the last 10 years, that institution has been a bulwark against a lot of things that could have gone the wrong way, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there are still, as with anything, there are bad lawyers, there's bad judges, there's bad cops, there's bad everybody out there. So, and being aware of that and knowing that, there's bad Republicans, there's bad Democrats, there's bad everybody. Again, like, it doesn't matter where you're at, what you're doing. There's a bunch of crappy people in the world. So
that's right.
As long as we stay aware of that, I think that actually helps us out a lot, and knowing that it doesn't matter whether they're on your side, quote unquote, or not. We should all be on the same side.
By the way, that is why I agree with everything you just said. And that's why I think it's really, I was raised, my father, and again, this wasn't really him saying this. This was just me watching him do it. He treated everybody as an individual, right? And so there are some people that are shitty individuals, or some people that are great individuals. He wouldn't treat people as members of groups. And so that's why I think it's so important that we treat people as individuals. Like, I don't care where you're from. I don't care what the color of your skin is. I don't care who you love. I care who you are as a person. And that's it. And I think if we start going too far into like the groupthink dynamics, I think we're going backwards when we do that. And so, it's very, and so talking about like law, philosophy, and computer science, all these things, to me, what is the law really? The law is a statement of our ethics as a society, right? It's just, this is what we think is right, and this is what we think is wrong. And I tell people, people complain about too many regulations and stuff. And I get that. There are too many regulations. But like, for example, take the free market, okay? I'm the biggest free market guy you'll ever meet, but there has to be rules. It's just like playing a sport. You have to have rules or there's no sport, right? If in basketball, if you just grab the basketball and run down the court, it's not a basketball game, right? In football, if you run out of bounds and run back in, that's against the rules. You get 3 strikes in baseball, not 4, not 2, you get 3. So you have to have some rules in order for the game to be played. And then you also have to have referees to enforce the rules, right? And that's the judicial system. And so I think, the law is a manifestation of our ethics, and it's also, it basically sets the rules of the game. And so I'm proud of the fact that I'm a part of helping this country succeed from a free market perspective, while also letting people kind of have as much freedom as they want within the rules of the game, if that makes sense.
So where do you think the rules of the game end up going south? Right? Because I have some arguments that we're not necessarily a free market capitalist country in many cases, right? So where do you think the rules kind of going awry in all of that, and how do we as a society kind of help look at that from a objective standpoint?
So where I see the most problems with the law is it can be captured by money and politics. So, for example, in Texas, they're talking about, and they've done tort reform in Texas so many times that there's no more medical malpractice left in Texas, okay, unless you're rich, because they've made it to where there's no way economically a lawyer and a client can even do a medical malpractice case. I think that goes too far. Why did that happen? Okay. It happened because a couple insurance companies and a couple rich liquor brokers in Texas formed a political action committee and paid a bunch of politicians to change the law that would favor them. Okay. That's where I think the system needs some help. There's far too much money in politics. And the Supreme Court has come out and said, essentially, money is speech, and so we're not going to put any limits on speech. Yeah. That's not practical. Like, are you telling me that if I have $1 billion and you have $10, we have the same amount of free speech? I mean, everybody knows that's not true.
Yeah.
And so I think money tends to infest things with in politics, especially with the wrong incentives. And by the way, I think people should make tons of money. I'm all for money. Like I said, I'm a big free market guy. I don't apologize for the fact that I'm successful. I don't think other people should apologize for the fact that they're successful. But when you warp the system, when you're already successful and you warp the system in such a way that it just completely wipes out large groups of people from being able to participate, that's where I think it goes a little bit too far. And the other thing is, Adam, I can tell you most of the time, if you want to know why some group, not individuals necessarily, or corporations, institutions, like I said, insurance company, you want to know why they're doing it, follow the money.
Yeah.
That most of the time, follow that path and you're going to find your answer right there.
Yeah. That's, as a former agent, like I said, following the money was oftentimes where he went. It's the same reason Al Capone got arrested. They followed the money, got it for taxes, right? So and it's the same thing. I can agree for sure on the politics side. Politics drives me absolutely insane. And the amount of money that gets thrown around inside the political system, which is why I say that I think there's a rather large argument that can be made that we're not really in a free market system if the politicians are able to control the system. That's not very, what's the first word? Free. Not very free if the politics are what controls it. So, completely agree. I'd love to see some reform on a lot of that sort of stuff. But, in the meantime, there's a system. We have to play in it as much as we can. You just happen to be in a part of the system that can kind of fight back a little bit. So tell me a little bit more about your law practice. And obviously, I know kind of how the impetus of how you got to that with that one case you talked about. But tell me a little bit more about your actual law practice that you do now.
Yeah, so we, like I said, VB Attorneys, we've been in business for 20 years. My partner and I have been a great partnership for 20 years. We have a number of lawyers that work for us, a number of paralegals. And basically, we represent, like I said, children, families, kids, working men and women, CEOs, professionals, doctors, lawyers, accountants, basically anybody that has been either hurt, injured, killed, wronged in a business deal, wronged by an insurance company. Sometimes I'll represent executives that are leaving a company and they won't be, they'll have some disputes about whether they're supposed to be paid separation bonuses and stuff like that. I've got a big case against a major broadcaster that I'll be negotiating next week in New York City. It has to do with some defamation claims. So basically any high stakes litigation matter that's not criminal, although we have done a few criminal cases. In fact, we got a unanimous not guilty in a murder case a couple of years ago, which is unheard of in Texas. But our guy was definitely innocent, by the way, no doubt about it. And by the way, the assistant, complete and total prosecutorial misconduct, hiding evidence, all like the stuff you read about with prosecutors. Sometimes that really does happen. I've seen it firsthand. And you know what? It's the same thing with police officers. Sometimes I love police officers. My stepmother's a police officer, come from a family of government workers, including police officer and military people. The problem is prosecutors and police officers have faced no consequences if they do something wrong. That's really what. So again, it's an incentive thing. But at the end of the day, what are we looking for here with the legal system? We're looking for basic fundamental fairness. And I think most people know what that means. I don't have to have 10 pages of definitions for you and I to know what's right and wrong. Like we kind of know. My dad always used to say that. He says, you don't have to have a 12-page rule book to know what you should do and what you shouldn't do. You know what's right and wrong. I don't have to tell you everything, you know. And Adam, you know what, you know whether you can feel it in your stomach when you're doing something that you know is not right. You can also feel it when you're doing something that is right. And so at the end of the day, that's really what the legal system is about. It's a constant battle because there are powerful forces that are trying to gain control of the system. And then there are people that are trying not to let that happen. And, it's just kind of we got to be diligent about this. We got to constantly be paying attention to it.
So I know that I had a lot of comments with my wife and I both carrying a badge and a gun about what our kids are or are not going to be able to get away with as they continue to grow up. So I kind of want to understand what it was like for your kids growing up with two lawyers as parents. Like there's probably very little arguing they could do. Like you guys probably had the arm wrestling match won on the argument side of the house. But what would your kids say it was like growing up under the two of you as parents?
Because my wife retired right when my second child was born, they didn't really get to see her practice as much. They got to see me practice, but they did get to see her and I have discussions, or arguments, whatever you want to call it. And they get to see us and they get to hear us talk. My kids, for whatever reason, their vocabulary just blows me away. Still, you may be talking to one of your boys. I think you said your oldest is 10, and they say something. You're like, where did you learn that from? Where'd you learn that word from? And it occurs to me they learned it from listening to mom and dad.
For sure.
And so they've seen that. They've also seen, I think, I hope they've seen that. And this was a lesson. My dad didn't care whether you were the judge or the janitor. He treated both people the same way. In fact, in some ways, he was harder on people in positions of power. Like that never impressed him. And so, I used to tell my wife, when the kids were young, I said, you take care of the misdemeanors and I'll take care of the felonies. And there weren't many felonies, so I didn't have to do much. But I tell you what, if one of my kids was mean to the lady that's been our housekeeper for 15 years, that's a felony, right? That's a felony. And so, and I don't know if any of them are going to be lawyers. Quite frankly, the law can be a very tough business, very stressful business. I think lawyers in top 3 when it comes to depression and anxiety. I actually think I know the reason for that, by the way. There's a very specific reason. But if they want to, that's great. And the main thing I think they've seen is I have an ability to help people that other people don't have, right? I have a law license, which enables me to file cases in court and represent people. It gives you a great deal of power. And so I think they've watched kind of how I've used that power to help, and what groups of people that I've focused on helping. In other words, I'm not focused on enriching billion-dollar insurance companies. I'm focused on defending the little girl that got her arm chopped off because the tire company made a crappy tire and, stuff like that. So I think that's probably, so they've got a good vocabulary and that they've seen me work really, really hard, long hours. But they've also seen that I've been able to do some real good in the world.
So I'm in the middle of editing some final edits on my book. And one of the things it's about being the dad and like trying to help other dads who are business owners kind of push more in the direction of leading their family and making that their legacy. Now, I want everybody to still grow big businesses and do that. Like I want all of that for myself as well. But trying to figure out, that balance of letting my kids see what hard work is, drive, growth, helping other people, and being there for them in the moments that they really need is one of those difficult things to kind of balance. I know you just mentioned that they've seen you work a lot of those hard hours, but obviously, you were. It sounds as though you were pretty present still as needed. So. What were some of the ways that you made sure that your kids knew that you were always there for them, regardless of whether the fact that you were working for one of your clients and they saw you putting all these hours in for somebody else's kid who, yes, they just lost their arm, but Dad, I've got this thing going on over here. What kind of conversations did you have growing up with them growing up to kind of discuss what that looked like for you guys as a family?
I didn't really have any conversations with him, although so again, my example was my father, single father, working full time in the Air Force, and then as a high school teacher, and he missed one sporting event my entire high school career, one time because he was on alert and he had to be there. And he says, people always ask me if I miss going to you and your brother's sporting events, and I always tell them not at all, because I went to every one of them. I did it the right way. I have no regrets, and so. I early on, I would have a lot more money if I didn't have a wife and kids, because all I would do was work. Right. Yeah. But I made a conscious decision that my wife and kids would come first. They would come before work, and I was going to design my practice around my life, not my life around my business. Okay. Most people, they design their life around their business. So they have a job, and then their life goes around that. I did it the opposite way. I said, this is what I want my life to look like. And then I designed my business to support that lifestyle. So that's number one. Number two is I decided, I could go out to a business dinner every night if I wanted to. And I decided that if the kids had a sporting event, that I would go to that every single time, unless it was impossible. It makes the decision-making so much easier. So tonight I've got this softball game with my daughter. I could go out to a business dinner with a referral lawyer that might send me some business in a couple months. It would be worth millions of dollars, but it's not even a consideration. Like, I can't do it. Sorry. Kid's got a sporting event. So I kind of set those rules. And then the last thing I did was, I've spent every summer in 2 months every summer in Colorado, at least, for the last 17 years now. The reason I remember that is because my daughter's 17 and we started doing it when she was just born. Now, I do some work up there, but I spend the most of that time recharging my batteries and spending time with my kids. So I've got to spend more time, even though I'm basically always working, because my office is in my brain. It's thinking. That's what I do for a living. So I'm working all the time in my brain, but I'm also spending more time with my kids than almost anybody I know. We used to go to Hawaii for 17 days. We did Hawaii for 17 days over Christmas for 6 straight years. And so there are times where I won't be able to go to a sporting event. So a couple of years ago, I was in federal court in San Francisco for a month in trial. Mm-hmm. That was a sacrifice. But guess what? As soon as that was over, 2 weeks doing nothing but hanging out with the kids and family. So it's a balancing act. I would just say, like my dad always used to say, everybody has the exact same amount of time. But everybody doesn't have the exact same priorities. We all have the exact same amount of time. My dad he worked out every single day. He's still alive, by the way, at 82. And he says, when I'm in hospice, I'm going to have a 2-pound dumbbell lying in the thing doing curls. Seriously, I believe he had this bad fall a couple of years ago. He likes to run and walk on the treadmill. He had a terrible fall out of nowhere. Rather than, what he did? Rather than stop going on the treadmill, now he wears a football helmet with a face mask in case he falls. Right?
A Texas A&M one, probably.
Yeah, exactly. And he played football there for 2 years. He was a walk-on at A&M. He used to get the what beat out of him by 2 guys that ended up playing in the NFL.
Very nice.
But anyway, the point of it is, it's a matter of priorities. And at 52 years old, one of the things I've realized recently is there's more things I want to do than I have time for in the rest of my life. So I'm like real conscious lately about what am I going to pay attention to and what am I going to spend my time on. Jiu-jitsu, I do it every single day almost. I take 1 day a week off. To me, that's a valuable use of my time for a lot of different reasons. Running my podcast, getting to talk to people like you, super valuable use of my time. But there's other things I've got to say, well, maybe I'm just never going to, I love to fish, especially fly fish. I'd like to start hunting. I mean, everybody I know, I'm in Texas, come on. Yeah. Everybody I know hunts. I'd like to learn how to bow hunt. But when you fly fish, do jiu-jitsu, play golf, and run 2 businesses, at some point you got to say, well, maybe I can't do that. And so to me, it's really, but when you're talking about your family and your kids and your business and your life, It's about your priorities, and you set those in advance, and then you execute on that.
No, you set me up perfectly, because I was going to ask you when you set those rules up, right? You said you set them up in advance. So how did you, I mean, you had what sounds like an amazing model as a father to set yourself up. So these rules that you kind of put in place and the things you did especially as a new lawyer, not exactly the easiest thing to pull off. When did you kind of set these rules up, and how did you work through that decision-making process of no, this is how I need to design what my life needs to look like?
I'll tell you exactly how it happened. I had a mentor, a lawyer named Ben Glass, who's in Virginia, who started a lawyer marketing business on the side. I was one of his first clients. He has 9 kids. Mm-hmm. 5 of them are adopted from China. He's part of a program for Chinese children with disabilities, so he'll go over there and help raise them. But 9 kids, full-time dad, full-time soccer guy, runs a law firm, runs a marketing company. And he was the one that told me, design your life first, and then have your business around what you want your life to look like. In my profession, it's a mark of achievement to say I work 7 days a week, 18 hours a day. Like he said, that shouldn't be a mark of achievement. So I very quickly said, that's not going to be my mark of achievement. I said, I'm going to design my life for, this is what I want. This is what I want my life to look like. I want to be able to spend as much time with my kids, especially when they're younger, as I can. I'm going to forgo a lot of potential financial success in order to spend more time with them. And notice the word I didn't use. I didn't say I'm going to sacrifice, because it's not a sacrifice to me at all. In fact, I'll tell you a story, Adam. So I worked for, when I left this big firm, I spent a couple years working for a smaller firm run by a guy that was super wealthy, new Lamborghini every 6 months, a massive mansion in the richest part of Houston. Miserable guy. Didn't even know his kids hardly. Yeah. And I remember I was up in Colorado shortly after. I was only there for about a year and a half. I learned a lot, by the way, mainly about what I didn't want my life to look like, which, by the way, is oftentimes more valuable, right? Way more. is the people that you don't want to be like. But anyways, it was a Tuesday afternoon. I'm up in Colorado in the middle of June. You know, my daughters, 4, sons are 7 and 6. They're playing around in the stream. It's 2:00 on a Tuesday, and I'm going, I'm way more wealthy than he is. Yeah. I don't have more money, but my life is richer and wealthier because I'm doing something that really fulfills me. So Ben Glass was the one that taught me that you don't have to do what everybody else is doing. Like, you can do different, like one of the things Ben always says, and I continue to repeat this, who made that rule? Yeah. Who said I can't take 2 weeks off in the summer? Now, you know, if you're not working for yourself, it's a different story, but you can certainly prioritize your family first, no matter what you're doing. Right. And so that's where that got started was my good friend, really, really good friend and mentor, Ben Glass.
Does he have a son named Brian by chance?
He does.
I know Brian. He's a buddy of mine.
How do you know Brian?
Yeah. So we're in GoBundance together.
Really?
Yeah. So we're in a mastermind together. I've had him on this podcast. Yeah. I've had Brian on this podcast. So
Ben was my first guest on my podcast. My very cool. First one. Yeah.
You know, I was going to mention that I had a buddy, and the second you said his name, I wrote it down. I was like, I bet you that's Brian's dad, because I was pretty sure it was. So.
Ben's an incredible guy. And,
so should I have the dad on as well? Should I have Ben on the podcast?
100,000%.
Oh, all right.
100,000%.
Yeah. Which would be the better intro? Would it be through his son or through you? That's the question.
Well, it's his son, so I would say his son. But I was going to say, no, seriously, like, definitely say Beckcom was on my podcast, and he said you were one of his. In fact, I'll go this far. He's one of my top 3 mentors in my life.
Nice.
My father, my high school basketball coach, and Ben Glass. I got basically everything I needed from my father. My high school basketball coach taught me that I could do anything I wanted if I worked hard enough. So he gave me what I think that was one of the best pieces of advice about working hard to get what you want. And then Ben Glass just gave me the advice and the guidance that I just told you about designing your life, who said that's the rule, asking questions about the so-called conventional wisdom. That was Ben Glass, and I've given him credit about that publicly 50 times because he deserves it. He truly is a great human being.
Awesome. That's phenomenal to hear. Now, it's leading me to another question, though. You just talked about the three people, right? I know that I'm hoping that I am for my kids the same thing, like as a person that's impacting their life. But I know that the impact of other people's words, and I think we talked about this before I hit record with my kid's judo coach yesterday, right? So the impact of other people's words, not dad, makes such a lasting impact if it is somebody that's a good, strong mentor. And I'd love to be able to place the right mentors in my kids' lives that will speak those words in, that I know, like, and trust, that are going to be on the same side as me and helping drive my kids towards success. Have you are there any key players in your kids' life that either you purposely placed there or that just kind of showed up that you think has been one of those people that they're going to be counting on and adding to their list?
It's funny. It's funny you asked me that question. So like I said, Clayton Brooks, my high school basketball coach, still alive. I still keep in contact with him. Total legend. So here's how I met Clayton Brooks. I was in 8th grade. I was in Texas. I was a good athlete. I was going to play football and baseball in high school like everybody else did. He came down to this 8th grade practice. He had just been hired. He saw me doing layups right-handed and left-handed, which most people in 8th grade couldn't do that.
Yeah.
And he walked up to me, and I'm an 8th grader, end of my 8th grade year. He's just been hired as a varsity basketball coach. He looked at me and he said, "I think you have a lot of potential. I'd like you to play for me." You want to talk about lighting a fire in somebody's belly. I mean, that changed my life because he believed in me. Like, he gave me some belief in myself. My kids, my two boys, didn't have that experience. Like, I thought every single high school basketball coach was like Clayton Brooks. Turns out most of them aren't.
Yeah, no kidding.
So, but again, Adam, back to what we were talking about earlier, bad mentors and bad leaders you get just as much, if not more, lessons from them as you do from the good ones. So I think they learned a lot in their high school sports about poor leadership and bad leadership. The thing that's been really, really exciting to me is the Corps of Cadets at Texas A&M, and particularly the outfit that my boys are in and some of the other outfits. There are some really, really impressive young men and women, 22, 23 years old, and my boys are surrounded by them. These are people that want to be recon Marines. They want to be CEOs of companies. They want to be government leaders. They're surrounded. So it's positive peer pressure, which is rare nowadays. So I don't really have to do anything at this point other than let them be around all these other amazingly impressive young men and women. And so I haven't really intentionally tried to push any mentors on them. I had both of my boys do jiu-jitsu with me. I thought that would be good, but at 15 and 17, they did it about 20 times. And they were like, "Okay, Dad, we're going to go do something else for a little while." But they've been fortunate enough to be thrust into a position where they're just naturally meeting a lot of really good people. So for example, my older son went to Washington, D.C. for the inauguration this year, and he's a member of a special unit. And he got to meet the president of Def Jam's Records and all these famous people up there. And, one of my good friends is a cabinet member now. And she is one of the most impressive people I've ever met in my life. And my sons have got to be around her. So it's kind of happened kind of naturally. Like, I always think like the environment you put yourself into is kind of more important than the decisions you make. You know what I mean? Like if you put yourself in a situation where there's a chance you might cheat on your wife, well, then you might cheat on your wife. But if you don't put yourself in that situation to begin with, you don't have to exercise much discipline, right? And so I'm really happy. So another quick story. Last summer, my son took the summer off. I think he's my older son working at a golf club or something, gained a little weight, drinking beer and stuff like that. Well, 3 weeks before school starts, what's he doing? He's out there PTing, working out, running, lifting weight. He's not doing it because I'm telling him to do it. He's doing it because if he doesn't, all his buddies are going to rag him about it when he comes back. So again, it's positive peer pressure. Like I see these boys he's around, and I know he's going to be a great father and a great husband because these buddies he's hanging around, if he's a douche, they're going to be like, stop doing that, right?
Yeah.
Like it's positive peer pressure. They say that you're kind of a compilation of the 5 or 6 people you spend the most time with. I think that's absolutely true, don't you?
Yeah, for sure. That's a Jim Rohn thing. You are the 5 people you're around most, and it's super true. I completely agree. That's why I joined a group like GoBundance, is to surround myself by, like-minded entrepreneurial men who are striving to be, good dads, good business owners, good, doing what they're doing. It's why I started this podcast.
Why did Brian join that group? Because he saw his dad doing stuff like that, right? His dad set the example for him.
Yeah. And that's where I'm hoping that, again, more things are caught than taught, that I'm able to show my kids through my example, what it is. And you gave me, you didn't mean to, but you did. You gave me some freedom to do what I'm doing later this year. And just to feel a little bit better about it is, my wife is retiring from the Air Force this year. We're selling the house, putting all of our stuff in storage, and we're buying an RV, and we're just going to travel the country as a family.
Congratulations.
I'm postponing a bunch of anything that I could be doing. Right now I'm probably the most anxious I've been in a while because I'm not working on anything.
Yeah.
Like I'm not trying to buy some business. I'm not trying to grow something. I'm just kind of waiting to start this new adventure. And it's like, it's eating me up because I feel like I should be doing some more. But it's one of those, it's like, no, I'm not sacrificing anything. I'm preparing myself for the adventure of a lifetime with my kids that they're going to hopefully remember the rest of their life. My 2-year-old may not remember the rest of her life because she's 2, but the boys I think are going to just be, in hog heaven, loving life, traveling the world, seeing everything. They've already been to 8 countries and now they're going to be able to see our country and now just go see what our amazing country has to offer. So I appreciate the switch that you just did in my head, just having that conversation about, I'm not sacrificing anything. I would be sacrificing if I didn't take this trip. So I'm looking forward to it.
You won't regret it. I'm telling you, as a father of a 21-year-old, a 19-year-old, and a 17-year-old, you won't regret that for 1 second.
Yeah.
I'll tell you the other thing, and this kind of dovetails into this. The other thing I've realized over the last 5 or 6 years is nobody cares at all what you do for yourself. Nobody cares if you have a big house. Nobody cares if you have a nice car. What they care about is what you do for other people.
Yeah.
And you spending that time with your kids like that, that's what they will remember. They won't even probably remember a lot of the details of like what you did and where you went. They'll just remember that you were there. So I remember we used to drive up to Colorado. We went up there one time for month and a half, went fish and camp and did all this crazy stuff. And then we drove back through Fort Worth and stopped at my dad's house. This is when the kids were younger. My dad took the kids to McDonald's, one of those ones with a playground. And then we drove home. And a couple days later, I was sitting around. I said, "What do you guys remember about our summer trip?" The McDonald's playground.
Yeah. Yeah.
They remember a single thing other than that, right?
Yeah.
But the point is I love to hear that you're doing that. And I promise you, when you look back in 10, 15, 20, 25 years, you will not regret that. You'll be so happy you did that.
Yep. I can already tell that I'm going to be. It's just, I cannot wait for it to happen. I'm really, really, really looking forward to it. It's going to be a long trip. It's going to be a lot of fun.
I've always wanted to do a trip like that. Yeah.
Well, I'll drive through Houston. I'll drive you across Texas, and then I'll put you at an airport and fly you back. So, but then you can say you did for part of it, right? So, but I am planning to stop all over the place and see as many people, especially GoBundance guys, as I can. Show the kids around what this amazing country has to offer, why it is that their parents served so many years in the military, what we're protecting and what we're what we're serving and what we're all about as a country. So I'm looking forward to that. So
awesome.
Now, as you kind of as a father who's a few years behind you with the same setup, my 2 older boys and then a daughter, my life kind of changed when a little girl came in, and it was like, boy, especially given what my previous job was, and, you know, chasing, you know, child predators and putting a bunch of them behind jail. Like, it just, something changed when you have a little girl. What is it like for you? You know, we've talked a little bit about the world and some of the changes that have been happening in, you know, society and doing what it's doing. What has it been like for you as a dad of a teenage daughter during this insane time that we're kind of going through as a country?
Great question. And by the way, my grandmother, or not my grandmother, my mother-in-law, the kid's grandmother-in-law, Granny, after she was an undercover police officer, she was a jailer and also an investigator in child sex crimes cases. So similar to what you did.
It's dreadful.
Yeah. I used to ask her, like, how she used to have to interview the victims and stuff. How do you do that?
Yeah.
Well, you got to compartmentalize and stuff. So my experience with the girl is like this. I grew up with my dad and my brother, total bachelor house. And then my dad adopted my older brother. Black guy, was one of his ROTC students, General McJimson. He's my older brother. He was in the Marines, and then he was a DPS officer in Virginia. Now he's a teacher, but it was all guys. And so I have the two boys. I'm thinking the third one's for sure going to be a boy. It's a girl. My knees get weak. What do? I didn't grow up with girls. This is a totally different experience for me. Best thing that ever happened in my life. In fact, sometimes my boys are like, Dad, you like Addie more. And I'm like, hell yeah, I do. She's a lot nicer to me. And she's going to take care of me when I'm older, and you're not.
So true.
But I tell you, I have this theory that, and this, of course, is just a rule of thumb, doesn't happen every time, but generally speaking, boys get their ethics and their morals from their mother, and girls get their ethics and morals from their father. So if the father is a cad and he's catting around all the time and not loyal to mom, then girls probably, you know, there's a chance she's going to go in that direction. So to me, it's been very important to me to kind of set the moral example for my daughter. I mean, for my boys too, but also for my daughter. The other thing that's real important, that's been more important, especially as she's gotten a little older, is to make sure she knows a little self-defense. So she's gone to jujitsu with me multiple times. We've talked about what to do in situations she might find herself in. And, other than that, I mean, girls are just smarter than guys at this age.
Yeah, for sure.
When they're teenagers, they're just more mature. Boys are knuckleheads when they're teenagers. Like, think about, you should think of, what were you thinking about when you were 15 and 16? You know what I was thinking about? Nothing. Like, I was an idiot, right? Yeah. I was thinking about, I wake up, let's go play sports. Oh, there's a good looking girl. Like, I was stupid. Yeah. Boys' brains don't really develop until they get into their early mid-20s. Girls, very, very mature. So my daughter basically, I don't have to do much anything. She takes care of everything. And it's been amazing. The best thing that happened to me, kids-wise, was having a little girl, because it's especially as somebody who didn't grow up around girls at all, to be able to see her grow and succeed and stuff like that has been a big deal. I was smart about it because I had two boys first. So I don't, if she's dating a guy that maybe isn't so good, I got two enforcers. And they take that role seriously, by the way. Like,
as they should.
Yeah, as they should. Like, they'll say, if she starts dating somebody they don't like, they'll be the first one to say that, avoid that guy. But I don't know. It's been quite frankly, way easier having a daughter. I mean, like, way easier. I mean, I had, to ground my boys multiple times, take away their cell phones. They're sneaking out of the house or sneaking dad's beer, just like typical idiots. Mm-hmm. And so, knock on wood, so far, none of that with my daughter.
So I love I try to tell people all the time, so my goal as a dad is to raise my boys to be better men than me, and to raise my daughter to find a better man than me.
Nice.
And the only way to make that possible is to be a good man at home. So you've alluded to it a couple times, like not putting yourself in a position that even the thought of infidelity could happen. It's not there. Like, showing my wife the respect that she deserves, so that my daughter can look at that and go, that's what a husband's supposed to look like. Showing my sons what it means to stand up for their wife. Oh, that's how I'm supposed to support my girlfriend and wife later on. You kind of alluded to a lot of that, and it's I think it takes a special couple to be able to work through that as well. And I'd love to kind of hear your take on that. Like how has your wife received that thought process, especially when you have a spouse who's a lawyer, which means she's successful, she's driven. Obviously, she decided to retire when she had kids, which I think is phenomenal that you guys were able to do that. What kind of conversations have you and your wife had around raising kids and being that representative of what you guys should look like for your kids? Was it intentional? Was it just because that's the way you two are? How has that kind of looked for the two of you?
It really wasn't intentional for the most part. I think probably the most important thing about my relationship with my wife and as it relates to the kids things is we have the same basic fundamental values about stuff, right? Like, so work hard, make good grades, don't be an idiot, be nice to people, just kind of, the normal kind of basic values. We share those values. And then beyond that, again, I hate to keep citing my dad, but my dad said this forever. He goes, there's no one particular way to be a parent. Like there's parents that are disciplinarians, there are parents that are very lenient, and everything in between. He said, none of that detail matters. All that matters is that you're present and they know you care. That's fundamentally, the rest is details. And so, like I said, my wife and I have been very, very, I used to go to 80 basketball games in a 2-month period because the basketball season was roughly 30 games and all 3 of them are playing. So that's 30 times 30 times 30. So literally I'm Sunday, and I was coaching at the time too. So, I'm at a basketball game every single night. And I got to be honest with you, there was times I didn't feel like doing it, right? Like I would rather just go home and go to sleep and watch TV. But I did it. Now, like I told you, my dad, I don't regret anything because I spent the time I needed to spend with him. One of the things that, and I don't know if this is right or wrong, but when my boys were playing high school sports and my daughter was in middle school, I told her, I said, if it's a conflict between Gus and Henry's sports and yours, I'm going to go to their sports, not yours. Because when they're out of the house, I'm going to be going to your stuff and only your stuff for 2 straight years, right? Yeah. So again, like you can't go to every single event if you have multiple kids. So what I decided to do is I'm going to spend more time with the older ones. And then when they move off, then I'm going to be, so it's really cool now because at home, it's me, my daughter, my 9-year-old dog, Louie, the chocolate lab, and my 12-week-old golden retriever puppy, Teddy.
Oh boy.
And every night, like the last couple, my daughter has gotten really into Friends. She loves Friends. And so every night I cook dinner when she doesn't have something going on, I cook dinner and we sit there and watch Friends reruns together. Right. And I didn't get to go to all her sporting events 3 or 4 years ago, but now I go to every single one. Right. And so again, it's to me, again, it's less about what you say and more about what you do.
Mm-hmm. How you show up. I love it.
Yeah.
What sort of things do you think that your kids are going to take from you as they're raising kids? So, when oftentimes I ask about the dads at the very beginning because we either run away from or run towards what our dads did. You obviously ran towards a lot of the stuff that your dad did and how he showed up for you as his son. And I know my dad ran away from what he saw from his stepdad, which helped me kind of understand who he was a little bit more. So I'm saying all that to say, what sort of story do you think when your kids are 50, they're going to say about their dad, that they say, hey, I ran towards this. This is, you've already alluded to a lot of it with the, you're showing them what it is. But from their perspective, what is it you think that they see that they're going to go, yeah, this is where my dad really showed up. And this is where I wish my dad would have showed up differently.
Yeah, I think, I hope what they'll say is he put me first. He put me above everything else other than mom. Like he put us first. And he would have absolutely run through a brick wall for me. There's nothing I wouldn't do for my kids. And you know, because of the way I grew up and I told the story about the 3 on the refrigerator with my dad, that gave me so much, I don't want to say confidence. It gave me so much, what's the right word? Peace, like security. I never had to worry about, you know, was my dad on my side or not, ever. Because I knew it didn't matter what I did. My dad would be on my side. I mean, even if it was bad, like he would tell me, you shouldn't have done that, but he's still going to be on my side.
Yeah.
And so what I hope that my kids remember is that I did my best to spend as much time with and put them first. And also that there's nothing I wouldn't do for my kids, like nothing.
I love it. I'm glad to hear that that it was all positive. There are going to be obviously there's going to be things that, you know, there's the saying, I don't know if it's a saying, but I talk to a lot of people and they're kind of like, oh, you're going to screw your kids up. It's just a matter of how bad and in what way, you know?
I'll tell you, I've screwed them up the most, seriously. And this is the thing. And I'm like, at this point, I'm like, whatever. They would have figured this out on their own. But, you know, I dipped Copenhagen for 20 years. So they grew up seeing me dip Copenhagen and or smoke cigars and drink beer. And guess what? My 21-year-old kid, he does Zens and he likes to drink beers.
Yeah.
That probably wasn't the best example, you know.
as my kids are like, is that bourbon in your glass, Dad? Yeah, it's bourbon in my glass. Thanks, bud. Like,
I tell you what, Adam. I tell you what. So I'll tell you a bourbon story real quick. My dad, when I grew up, my dad drank 16-ounce Coors Yellow Bellies. That's the only thing he ever drank, and he drank 3 every night. I never saw him drink 4 ever. But I never saw him drink 2 either. He would never drink during the day. He would never drink at dinner, but he would get home. He'd put his beers in the freezer. He'd watch ESPN, drink his beers, and go to bed. So I didn't grow up drinking liquor at all. My wife and I got into wine about 10 years ago, but I've noticed lately that, if I drink 2 glasses of red wine the next day, I'm dragging.
Yeah.
I like scotch, but I've never liked whiskey. Until about 3 months ago, I've gotten into old fashions.
Oh, they're my favorite.
Oh my gosh. So every night now I'm trying to dial in the perfect old fashioned. I even bought a clear ice machine and, you know, I got all the different bitters and the syrups and all that. And I still don't like whiskey, but you know what? I love old fashions.
Yes. Yeah. I've got like the smoking thing for the old fashions.
That's what everybody asks me. They say, do you have the smoking thing first? I said, that's the only thing I don't have right now is the smoking thing.
It's wonderful. Like I don't know. I don't remember the first time I had it, but if I go out and if I ask for an old fashioned and they're kind of like, oh, well, you know, okay. And don't ask what kind of bourbon I want in it, I'm probably going to assume it's not going to be great.
Like it.
I've become a snob on my old fashions. And I'm like, it's like, all right, I got to have them at the right place. You know, like even if I go to a place where I'm like, oh, this place is going to have a good one, I don't even have to worry about it. Give me an Angel's Envy old fashioned or whatever. Right. And they're like, all right, they bring it out to me and it's got like lots of ice cubes in it. I'm like, all right, I'm not going to like this. Like, I'm not going to like it. I'm already not going to like it.
That clear ice is a big part of it because it changes the character of it over time and it gets better and better. It's so funny. It's so funny you'd say that. The other thing is, like, I used to joke with my wife. I'd go out to eat dinner with all my buddies. Every dude I know has like a manly sounding go-to cocktail. Give me a Maker's and Die, you know, give me this or that. And I didn't have one. I like,
and now you do.
Give me a glass of Chardonnay. That sounds so wimpy, right? But now, I can say, give me an old fashioned. I like Manhattans too, by the way. I've been working on those a little bit. And then there's another one called a Sazerac. I don't know if you've heard of a Sazerac.
I have. Yeah.
I've been working on that one a little bit too. That's so the old fashioned. And I've got a friend of mine. He's my best friend. And he drinks maybe once every 2 months. But now he's into old fashions too. And so we're like competing to see who can dial in the best old fashioned recipe.
When people come to my house, that's what I make. I make everybody old fashions, and it's I tell everybody I don't make it as sweet as you're going to get outside because I don't like them too sweet. I like to be able to still taste my bourbon, but man, do I love a good old fashioned. So
you like bourbon instead of rye?
I'll do either one. I don't mind rye or bourbon. Totally fine with either one of them. They both I like the extra bite that the rye has to it. Like
Me
it's
too.
just kind of a nice little extra bite there. So
I'll give you two little secret ingredients. So I'm the same way. Bourbon or rye, both are good. But for the sweetener, I've got this FIG syrup. I put just a little bit of that, and then black walnut bitters.
Okay,
black walnut bitters.
That's definitely going on my notes.
Yeah. I just like smelling the black walnut bitters is really amazing. And then I stir it 53 times.
That sounds like okay. Well, why?
Because right when I got into old fashions, I ordered one at this restaurant in Colorado. It was really good. I asked the bartender, "How do you make it?" He goes, "This is how I make it." And then I stir it 53 times.
There you go. And
okay.
He said, well, it worked for him.
So now I'm in there 1, 2, 3, 4. My wife's like, "Why are you stirring that thing so much?"
Because that's what did it for that guy. 53. It's got to be.
I stir my Manhattans 52 times. They asked me why.
Well, I don't want to ask you why this time. I just want you to tell me.
Less than 53.
It is. As a matter of fact, that's pretty smart for a lawyer. I'm impressed.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, Brian, it was fantastic to have a good conversation with you. I really appreciate the wisdom that you passed on. I feel like you were just giving me advice the entire time on how to be a better dad and how to show up better, and giving me permission to do some of the things that I want to do and haven't executed on. So I thank you very much for being a solid dad, for showing up the way you do, supporting your clients the way you do as well. If folks are hearing this and they want to reach out to you, or maybe listen to your podcast, or maybe they are looking for a solid lawyer who can help them out, what's the best way for folks to get a hold of you?
VBattorneys.com, V as in Victor, B as in Brian, attorneys.com. That's our main website. Brian Beckcom Lawyer is my Instagram, which, I'm on all the social media, but I'm most active on Instagram. And then the podcast is Lessons from Leaders with Brian Beckcom. Just look it up. It's on YouTube and on all the other podcasting applications. By the way, Adam, great show, great kind of platform, and great questions. Like you enabled me to talk a lot today about some stuff that's really important to me. But the reason I was able to do that is because you asked great questions.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And thank you for jumping on and being open and vulnerable and being able to talk about anything and everything and answering all of my crazy questions. But everybody listening, please like, subscribe, comment. Let us know what your favorite part of this conversation was. Reach out to Brian if there's anything he can do to serve you, and definitely go listen to his podcast. It will be going on my list of podcasts to listen to as well. Thank you again, Brian. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and we will see everybody on the next show.
Thank you so much for listening to the BizDad Podcast. We hope you found some value in your time here with us, and we look forward to bringing you the next episode. If you've enjoyed today's show, please subscribe and share so you and your friends won't miss our upcoming episodes. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Rumble, where we continue these discussions and share more valuable content. Be the dad you know you need to be and run your business in a way you're proud to share with your kids. Keep crushing it.